It's May 12th, 2020. Welcome. I was just showing you the logo, our new logo for St. George Paramotor. So go to our website, stgeorgeparamotor.com, and see all the videos we've posted, learn about our school, and get acquainted with Southern Utah, the best flying in the world, unquestionably. There are some dramatic areas to go to, like Monument Valley and the mountains up the northwest, the beaches on the west coast, east coast, all fantastic, but kind of single dimensional. Here in St. George, we have everything from dinosaur tracks to lava fields to magnificent cliffs, lakes, rivers. We've got volcanoes, we've got sand dunes, all within a very close flying area. So we love it. We have guys coming in from all over the world to join with us and fly, live the dream right here in St. George, Utah. What I'm trying to do is create a segment or a series of segmented videos that will answer a lot of questions for you and hopefully orient you to the point where you're making wise decisions, whichever way you decide to go. Look at everything and then make some smart choices. And there's one person here that has made every possible error on the planet. And over the last decade of flying, you want to make smart choices. But when you're guessing, when you're learning as you go, it makes it much more difficult. It's kind of an adventure. I have enjoyed it and have been lucky at times. And I'll share those moments with you, maybe down the road. But here today, in this discussion, what I want to do is help those who are anticipating getting into the sport get some information so you're making some smart choices, decisions that will impact your flying and particularly your safety. We are ultimately concerned about your safety. That's number one. Number two is the enjoyment of your flying. And the choices you make early in your adventure will determine the outcome, obviously. But it seems like little choices, little decisions, little events will have ramifications long term and felt dramatically in some cases. Anyway, the discussion today is I'm looking at the sport and I don't know whether to go with foot launching or with a vehicle wheel launch. And so we're going to discuss that real quick. We are set up here, and welcome to my garage, by the way. It's kind of the garage of many generations. Here we have a couple of generations of paramotors. Recently got in the Tornado, the Air Conception Tornado. Very impressed so far. It's an amazing power plant, and it is as light as the 200. This is a 280, has a triple prop. It is a fantastic machine. And if you're foot launching down the road, maybe as you get more experience, to step into something this sophisticated, it is fantastic. The 200, very versatile, adequate for most flying needs. It's a great machine. This is the second generation of trike that I designed. When I moved into the trikes later, after flying for a while and having some challenges foot launching, because I started flying when I was 63, and I foot launched, and on the coast it's a totally different story than what it is at altitude or at your home. If you're living at any elevation at all, there are factors that you're probably aware of, air density and winds and topography. There's a lot of variables that have to be taken into consideration, but the higher the altitude, the more difficult it is, a little more difficult. The dynamics are different, so that it becomes different than if you were, like I was, trained on the coast, northern Oregon, there at the Columbia River, where the state of Washington and Oregon come together. The consistent coastal breezes, the predictable winds that allow you to reverse launch as well as forward launch, or anything basically you want to do. You can launch and land and launch and land and think that you're a good pilot. And then training's over, you've graduated, you're all excited, the trainer looks like he's a real expert, you know, super trainer. And then you come to altitude, you're on your own. You're home now. You've got your gear. And everything changes. Believe me, everything changes. And the challenge begins. And so this again will help you. If you're under 50 years old, I would say your most viable option for enjoying the sport is your foot launch. There are some pluses and minuses, which we'll go through real quickly. Pros and cons with foot launching. Then we're going to go to the trike launch. As I said, this is second generation trike that I designed. And this is the recent, last couple weeks, third generation trike. And we're going to go through, and one of the segments is go through the details of the benefits of a designated trike and the features and benefits of each one. But foot launching, what I did is jotted down some pros and cons for both modalities, okay? And foot launching, I don't know, most of you, everyone that I talk to, my students, you know, and one of the things I ask them is if you ever had a dream, have you ever had a dream of flying, that you in your dream would just run and put your arms out or just be able to just fly? And probably better than half of them have. And I've got to say that if you have, this is as close to living the dream as you can get. And the controls are very delicate, very accurate. You can do things, as you know probably, that's caused your interest. You can control these both with the trike and foot launch incredibly, and do some very intricate flying. And most of my flying is low, and I enjoy interacting with the topography, is what I say. Enjoying the river, for example, and just feeling that cool air in the summertime coming off that water, or up at the reservoir, or chasing dune buggies up on the sand dunes. It's really, really fun. But low flying is my preference, actually. I get too high and I start getting nervous, wondering what in the heck am I doing up here? Anyway, foot launching is, again, as close to living the dream because there's a minimalist mentality. There's as little around you, there's minimum gear and whatnot. You're interacting with Mother Nature, believe me. Your feet are dangling and there's nothing else there. You look up and you see these skinny little lines, these strings attached to a bedspread above you. And you think, oh man, I don't know if I'm sane or lost my marbles. But the first couple times I did that, you know, you look up and feel what's going on. You a couple thousand feet off the ground, you go, don't fail me now. You know, you think, how good is the technology? Well, the technology and the wings is amazing, amazing. That's what attracted me to the sport. And I've been looking at doing this since the mid-70s, 1977. I started looking, and it took me until 10 years ago to make the decision. Anyway, the minimalist attitude, when you've got the equipment on and whatnot, you're walking, the weight is a little bit disconcerting. These are the lightest that you can buy, so it's amazing. So when you're younger, you have the muscle mass, you have the ability to negotiate the weight, then that's great. If not, then of course you're looking at the trike, because there's no weight. You lay the wing out, you roll that out, you warm up the engine, you hook it up, and you sit down, strap in, and go. And so it's easy, quick. But the foot launch doesn't require as large a launch area as does the trike. You want a smooth area for the trike, if possible. I've launched many times on a road. In fact, sometimes the wind is coming at an angle, and you always want to launch into the wind as directly as possible so that it assists you in your wing control. But sometimes it's coming at an angle on the road, so you have to set up at an angle, you roll it up, and as soon as you got control, immediately you're negotiating down the road, so you're turning during your launch. And you can do that. I've done it hundreds of times with the trike. But with the foot launch, it's basically the same thing, but you're running. Now, one of the disadvantages of foot launching is that if you're in a no-wind launch situation, you're going to be running, and you're going to be running with that weight on your back. Even though once it rolls up, that wing rolls up, and you're stabilizing it above you, you're throttling up and it's helping you. Many times, depending on your gear, and we'll talk about that specifically, if you have just average or beginner gear and stuff like that, you will be running and it will tax you. It will tax you. During the training phases, first things we deal with is what's called kiting, and it's learning ground control on that wing to become connected to the wing in every aspect possible so that you can read and anticipate what that wing's going to do. Anticipation is the magic key, the elixir to this sport. Knowing what that wing is going to do and anticipate it so that it doesn't, so you're not reacting, but you're initiating the control. Anyway, so if you don't mind running a bit and carrying weight, we have a couple students that are a little smaller, and they work pretty hard. But once their skill level increases, then of course everything becomes easier and easier and easier and easier, and until and when they're first beginning, they want to. A lot of guys enter the sport with the budget as the first consideration, and as a result, they've got heavier, less efficient wings. They have less efficient engines and heavier frames and whatnot. The more expensive frames, this is titanium. They are very light, very strong, but that works into what you're able to do getting into the sport. It's better to be able to, or be in the sport and have something to work with than not be in the sport and just sit on the sideline because you can't get the best stuff. So as long as you're safe and have instruction, we deal with guys bringing their gear in. In fact, we've got one coming in on the 15th of this month. He's bought his gear, but he's never flown. He doesn't know what's going on, so we will inspect as part of the class the gear, make sure it's safe, and sometimes we even fly it for them, make sure it's safe and flyable. Anyway, so there are some advantages. It doesn't take us quite the distance to foot launch usually, as it does a trike, even though the trike is up in very, very comparable distance. But I think the most dramatic difference between the two, and I think is critical for you to consider going into this sport, is landings and emergencies. And I kind of specialize in that. I was doing a lot of experimenting early, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where it caused an engine out, or they didn't have the technology. Even though I had a Biderasi Classic, I got a lemon. I had a lemon. I even had the spark plug blow out 2 times right out of the cylinder head. And it was before the shroud, it was before the cooling props. Really some challenges I was having as a result of prop strikes on my lines, trying to learn how to launch, negotiating this altitude and these wind conditions. I would have prop strikes and didn't know, and it was completely invisible to the eye, a fracture in the aluminum engine mount was created from a prop strike. But to see the performance of the engine, to look at it, you couldn't see it as a hairline. But it worked its way all the way around the engine mount to the point where at Dumont I was flying over the sand dunes and the entire engine blew up and it fell off. it was a dramatic moment because I had an emergency landing. I was flying with the wind, and it was probably 18 to 20 mile an hour wind, so you're really throttled up, and I was really clipping, and instantly at that moment I was headed down. And if you're flying with the wind, of course it's going to drive you into the ground. And but I didn't have any choice, because if I had turned, it would have just dropped me straight into the ground. So I got a little angle as much as I could possibly, and I was braking everything, but as much as possible, that is. And it did break everything, because when I hit, man, I hit boom, and everything came apart. And I learned then that if I had been on a foot launch versus the trike, I would have been in trouble physically. I could have been seriously hurt. But as a result of the structure behind my designated trike built into it, I got up, unstrapped, and walked away. I was just absolutely fine. But bits and pieces of my engine and exhaust were laying across the sand dunes, and it was funny but upsetting. But if that had happened with a foot launch, or something similar, where you were into an emergency situation and you were going with the wind and you didn't have much altitude, I would say I had 40 feet, you would be in trouble. You would have hit the ground so hard that it would have broken a bunch of stuff. And so that's one of the disadvantages of foot launching, a consideration you need to make. Of course, while you're flying, that's one of the top two things that's on your mind, is the direction of the wind. What direction is that wind? Just in case you have an emergency, you want to get into the wind, facing the wind, as quickly as possible as you're negotiating a landing spot. Maybe this is too negative information for the sport, maybe too realistic, but I am a realist, and I want you to be safe. I want you to enjoy the sport, but understand the reasons for why we've done what we do. And later on, I'm going to break down individual benefits for each modality of flying, so that it'll help you make that decision, be an educated flyer, and be a safe flyer. Let's see, I've jotted down a couple of notes here just to see, because when I start going, I start forgetting, and so much for the script, Getting in and out of gear. It's so simple to sit and do the straps, and there you go. You're in, you're ready to fly. Get out, you're doing the same. Here, you have to negotiate getting up and down, strapping about 5 different straps, and it is much more difficult. So if you are geared up, if you have the engine on, you're warmed up, you're ready to go, you've laid your wing out, you're carrying that, and you're sweating like a dog, and then the wind shifts, and you wait, and you're carrying it, then you sit down and wait for the wind to come back. It doesn't come back, so you have to take all the gear off, generally, and renegotiate the wing layout. Then you gear back up, and you hook up, you're ready to go, and the wind shifts again. Well, that's typical St. George. It's typical inland flying, the variable wind directions. And so that's a definite challenge for the foot launch guys. Us trike guys, very easy. Get out, slide the wing over, line it up, get back in, and you're off and going. So that's huge. Let's see. Transporting. Of course, it's easier to transport less gear, of course. And this being modular will break down even what you see now. So you're able to put it in a small vehicle. That's the best part of foot launching, in my estimation, other than being minimalist while in the air. The trike also is modular. The Air Conception has a modular trike that is specific to their frame. my preference is a designated trike, and the trike doesn't break down, but I'm able to roll it up into the back of my pickup truck, and the wheels sit on the either side of the back panel and the gate, and I tie it in with tie downs here, and away we go. It's so easy and quick that it's a challenge. It's a competition for the foot launch guys. So because I just roll it up and hook it on, and I'm out of there, you know. So it's quick and easy. These are some of the highlights. Let me see. Oh, with the trike, you can pack around extra gear. There's extra areas and a couple of other things. The old guys, you're limited age-wise and condition-wise on the foot launch. For the old guys, we can do this until we're 80 years old. I'm convinced, and I've got another 7.5 or 8.5 years. Here I am, 8.5, 9 years away from 80 years old, and I'll tell you, I'll be flying because I've got the trike. Boy, I just want to go right now, in fact. One of the disadvantages that I have found to the trike is that in windy conditions, and you're trying to forward launch, because a reverse launch, which is the preferable way foot launching, where you're facing the wing and you're bringing it up, get control, then you turn around and launch. That's a reverse launch, and it's the safest kind of launching when your prop is set this far behind your frame. There's no doubt that's the way you want to go. Forward launching, where the lines roll up the side of the frame, it's easy to catch that prop and eat a line or two. You don't get the option until you're highly skilled with the trike on the reverse launch. I have seen it done. I've never attempted it, never needed to. I've devised ways to always forward launch, and it makes my life real simple that way. But it simplifies your launches, but how about the landings? Landings are much simpler with the trike than they are with a foot launch. You have to land into the wind with a foot launch if you're hoping to flare and stop or slow down enough so that your feet can run that landing out. And if you're coming in at a high speed, you don't have a chance foot launching. It's really, really tough. However, I was doing some high-speed landing experimentation several years ago up at the old airport in St. George, and coming in, I bet I was going 40 miles an hour, and was successful at every angle of approaching the runway, and I would land and then relaunch and land and launch and land, and I take care of a large spider. I usually don't kill him, but he's headed for the door. Anyway, you can high speed land, be careful. Now, one of the drawbacks to landing either modality is when you're just about ready to land, you hit a crosswind and it starts moving you sideways. You're able to compensate for that, of course, in your steering, but a lot of times it's still moving you sideways and you can't get absolute total lateral movement stopped. So in a trike, if you're moving laterally, it can tip you over, but if you're aware that it's happening, you can steer into it and it'll turn you immediately into it, which is why I prefer the negative cantilevered front wheel assembly, because it responds quickly. You move into the direction of your landing, and it simplifies and the landing and makes it much, much safer. Anyway, I've rambled on and but covered some important information. Hope I haven't discouraged you, but what we'd like you to do is contact St. George Paramotor on our website, okay, stgeorgeparamotor.com. You can see our new logo and ask any questions you want. We much prefer you fly safely, and even though we're dealers or distributors for Vitarazi as well as air conception and wings, you can get through us. Ozone, we're distributors, and any questions you have, feel free, really feel free to call and ask. So you have a good one. Hope to hear from you, and take care. See you in segment 2.